Hello, hello. Happy Sunday, everyone. Welcome back to the UpSet podcast. We're happy that you tuned in this Sunday evening. And I'm happy that I have my crew, my favorite crew in all the land, my upsetters. Hey,
Hello,
guys.
hello,
Sunday.
family. Good
How
to
is
see
everybody
you.
feeling this Sunday evening?
With that smile
Feeling
must be
great.
good.
Yes, feeling great. What an evening. What a day it's been,
I
right?
tell you, just brimming with energy, ready to roll.
That's
So
right.
far.
Let's
Yes.
play two.
Oh,
All
my
right,
goodness.
so let's get right to it. What's been going on in this wonderful world of ours that has caught our attention this week?
And there was
One of
silence
the
in
things
heaven.
it's like coming full circle. We handled this topic some episodes back, but the Pope visiting Canada
Mm.
to apologize to the indigenous
Oh,
people there for
yeah.
the boarding schools that so many indigenous people, children were lost. Last count was over 4,000.
Wow.
Wow.
If you can
Wow.
imagine, 4,000 young souls
Wow.
were abused or killed or
Mm.
whatever. So it kind of brought that ache back to me. And so I know we talked a little bit about it, when I let out in that indigenous thing
Wow.
before, but it kind of opened up a scab there. But yeah, that was a focus of my attention.
Wow.
Okay.
And I didn't even know about that. So it was, very educational for me. I had not heard that.
So how do people, when they do those apologies, is it well received by the indigenous community, or how
Not
do
really. That was the response. A lot of the indigenous elders and leaders said, one said, really, Pope, you could have done that on Zoom.
Did they actually
Really?
say that?
Yeah.
Really,
He
Pope?
said,
Come all the way here for
why
that.
all the money to say we're sorry, but yeah, and the hurt is still there. And even in the United States, there's still,
I can imagine.
our Secretary of the Interior, who is an indigenous woman, is still researching our faults here in the United States as well.
Yeah, I was
But
about to
I
say.
just say let's not forget about these people, because they were First Nation.
True.
Yeah.
True.
Mm.
I find it amazing that a guy can get on a boat, get lost, land to a place he did not know, and then call people out of their name, and the name still sticks. He thought he was in India, and
Mm-hmm.
they said, "No, we're Arawak." No, you're Indians, because that's where I was headed. But
Right. That's right.
oh
That's
well.
true.
Well, in the news on this end, what has really surprised me, and I don't know if you heard, is that the United States is now the nation with the most cases of the monkey virus.
Oh,
Oh, really?
Yeah. I
I
mean,
didn't know we had become the
And
most.
climbing.
yeah. And the
climbing.
thing is, I remember when a little 2.5 years ago, we were talking about those poor people in undeveloped countries suffering from whatever that coronavirus was. Then the next thing you know, the United States was number one. And now once again, we are beset with a plague. And many people are beginning to ask the question, are we under some kind of curse? Or worse yet, are we being visited by some kind of plagues?
wow.
Well, I think there is some correlation between Western countries, because the UK has high numbers as well. And I think that speaks to maybe the Western lifestyle.
Yeah.
You don't find it to be in a lot of other smaller countries, island, countries, but mostly the big westernized countries are the ones tend to have the higher numbers. And I think it's just a lifestyle thing that, we party here,
Yeah,
Right.
that's
And the
true.
travels
lot.
to and fro, right? The travels
Right.
to and fro, people coming and going within the country. So
A
that's
lot of
a lot
vacations.
of transmission.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's kind of like, what's next with these
In
different-
times, man. In times.
Yeah, mercy. All right. Well, we were kind of I don't want to say anxious to jump into this topic, but we are intrigued by it, to say the least. And this is also kind of predicated upon something that's been in the news for those who've been following what's happened with a certain gentleman, certain preacher of the gospel. But Tally's going to lead us into this discussion. So, Tally, we turn it over to you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's always a privilege for us to come together and to apply the brilliant and scintillating genius of this panel of experts on the topics of the day. And
No, it's not.
Oh, he
No,
made
go
it.
ahead. I'm sorry.
well, the UpSet podcast today takes up something that many of you may have seen in the news this past weekend. Something happened that caused all of us to be a little bit concerned. It comes out of Canarsie, Brooklyn, New York, and most of you may have seen this already, but for those of you who have not, you will need to know that while a gentleman was leading his church in worship by the name of Lamar Whitehead in Canarsie, Brooklyn, while he was at his pulpit, suddenly the back door flew open, and in the middle of his sermon, he noticed that there were 3 or 4 men coming in brandishing weapons. He recognized what this was about, and he began to go to the floor, telling everybody to be calm while his church was robbed. More specifically, he and his wife were robbed. They didn't do this during the offertory. They came specifically for him. Now, the question gets asked, who is this Bishop Lamar Whitehead? Because you begin to immediately feel very, very sympathetic towards a minister in his pulpit when these ne'er-do-wells, these miscreants of society come in to rob him. But who is he? Well, the questions at first are easy to answer. He is the pastor of the Leader of Tomorrow International Church. There in Brooklyn, New York, he has established himself, the son of a former political leader, politically connected now to Mayor Adams of New York, looking to become the borough president himself of Brooklyn, and he is also a pastor. He spent some time in jail, but the charges after 6 years were dropped, and he came out, became the pastor of this church that he founded, and he is also now a bishop of the Leader of Tomorrow International Ministries. You think to yourself, maybe that's why he was robbed, because people recognize that he was an influential minister. But then the plot thickened somewhat, because on the day that he was robbed, they did not take his wallet. They simply took his jewelry. And ladies and gentlemen, on his person and the person of his wife, at the moment he was robbed, he was in possession of more than $1 million of material goods in the form of jewelry. And if you add up his mode of conveyance, the 300 plus $1,000 Rolls Royce that was parked in front of his church, then we're getting close to $1.5 million, close to, on his person on the day that he was robbed. That makes you ask some questions about this gentleman. How does a pastor have a lifestyle like this? A little bit more digging, and it was discovered that he lives in a mansion like this.
Wow.
And as we can see, one of our pastors is saying, when is it my turn? It's a beautiful home. And the understanding is that is not the only property that he owns, but that is where he lives. However, even though he lives in a mansion like that, his church looks like that.
Oh.
And now she says she doesn't want to turn. You know? This is a very, now, you might notice it says Deliverance Temple International to the right. That is not his church. The building with the black awnings, that's the building where he was robbed. Which does not
storefront
even,
church.
there we go. Now we're talking. How does a man with a small church like this find himself with over $1 million worth of material goods on his person on the day that he is robbed? And it makes us ask some questions about the nature of ministry these days. And that is, are we having churches now, or are we producing cults of personalities where highly visible and charismatic individuals become the heads of groups of people functioning in the name of God? And you don't have to think long about the milieu. You don't have to think long, because all around us now, we have individuals who are pastors, but who are also celebrities They are millionaires. Everybody that you see on this screen they're all multi-millionaires, but they are also pastors of churches. We begin to ask ourselves some questions. Is this what God wants? Is this healthy for congregations? Are these individuals who are spiritual leaders, or is there something more going on? And these are honest questions to ask without impugning the personalities or the characters of any of the people that you see on the screen. But still, we ask ourselves some questions when we see pastors who have enormous wealth, particularly when their congregations do not, because we think about the fact that there is a passage of scripture in the Bible that says to us, do not love the world or the things of the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh and the desires of the eyes and the pride of life, is not from the Father, but is from the world. 1 John 2:15 and 16. So we're conflicted. We're wondering. We ask ourselves some questions when we see ministers with this kind of wealth. Forget the robbery, but focus on the fact that whoever it was who did the robbing realized that this minister was laden with gold and jewels that would equal almost $1 million if they simply robbed him. We ask ourselves the question, does God want charismatic personalities as leaders? Is it healthy for leaders of spiritual communities to exhibit ostentatious wealth? And the answers seem difficult to get to, but ladies and gentlemen, if there's one group that can get it done, they are the 5 wizened minds who come together every Sunday evening to unravel the mysteries of life. And we herewith convey to these great thinkers, is it good to have wealthy, charismatic leadership? Are churches centered on Christ, or are they becoming cults of personality? What say ye one? What say ye all, members
Wow.
of the UpSet podcast?
Mercy. Where do we start?
I
Well,
was thinking about the robbers, it's like they had respect for God, so they didn't steal the money from the church. They just stole his money.
I don't think they had respect for anybody. I mean, but it's. I don't. The real question is this something that is to be for a minister to be wealthy? Is that bad? For him to have ostentatious wealth, is it bad?
Tally, you were telling us a story. Maybe I ought to be careful. I'm not sure if it was in the green room or whether we, that you and a friend of yours was driving a sports car back in the day.
That is so untrue. There was once a
It's rumored.
rumor.
Well, it was a rumor.
There was a rumor that when well, it was just a rumor, so we won't even entertain it.
Right.
Sports
I mean,
car.
but
I do
I've
know
known,
of, I do know of a pastor when I was growing up that drove a Stingray.
yeah.
I do know a Seventh-day Adventist pastor. I grew up in Adventist, and I up to this day, people still talk about it. About it. I do know of a president that has asked one of his pastors not to drive this car to his church. I've heard of that before. But I mean, as a pastor, I did not take a position of poverty because to me it's relative. It's relative, So if you have, I will never walk around with $600,000 worth of jewelry on me. I wouldn't do that at all.
Mm-hmm.
But it's relative. What if it's our home that's worth that? And your average member don't. I'm just saying when we look at it, I may not do that, but I may have it in some other type of assets.
Right. So I think it's okay for a pastor to be wealthy. I think it comes down to how did you attain that wealth? I mean, are you wealthy because you have manipulated your church members and giving you their last dime every Sunday or every Sabbath? Just so that you could amass this great fortune while they suffer, that's something else. But if you just happen to be, financially savvy and you've invested well, or your spouse is doing well and you acquire wealth, there's nothing wrong with that, I think. But being ostentatious with it, I think we shouldn't be that way anyway. I mean, that's not, that's not how God, that's not how the Bible outlines we as Christians should be anyway. I mean,
No, not at all.
Uh-oh.
But wait a minute. I just want to add that God does bless his people. I mean, we have rich in the Bible, Job and Abraham, people who had a lot of stuff. But I think God wants us to be good stewards of what we have. It was interesting, and to bless his people with what we have. It was interesting when Tal, I mean, you were excellent today. I mean, you're always good, but that was showing the storefront in comparison to his house. When God's house should always, look better, I mean, there's something that he is doing with his monies. And if the church looked like that, he can't have a whole lot of members. Not a whole lot, I would say. And so I don't know how he's getting, I mean, maybe his investments and things that he's doing, I don't know. But, God will bless his people. And there's no sin in being a wealthy preacher. I think the issue is how you use the monies. Are you flamboyant with it? Do you bless others? What do you do? Do you represent God with the monies?
Does God want his leaders to be wealthy? Does he? Let me just share a scripture. I don't mean to pollute this conversation with the scripture or anything, but let me just add.
No,
Let me
definitely
add.
not spiritual.
Psalm 112. Praise the Lord. Blessed are those who fear the Lord, who find delight in his commandments. Their children will be mighty in the land. The generation of the upright will be blessed. Wealth and riches are in their houses, and their righteousness endures forever. I mean, all throughout, especially in the Old Testament, it seems like there might be a divide. But in the Old Testament, we find God recommending and commending and conveying wealth. God said to Solomon, what do you want? Tell me, ask what you want. And Solomon said, that you might give me the wisdom to come in and go out among my people so that I might lead them. And God said, you really asked well, but because you asked that, I'm going to give you wealth also. I remember when I was first ordained, I said, Lord, only that I might have the wisdom to come in and go out among my people. And the Lord said, we'll work on that. But that wealth thing, that's not coming. So I'm wondering, is it that God no longer wants us to be wealthy? I mean, when it seems scripturally, it gets recommended.
I don't think it has to do with wealth and money, really. You look at houses and cars and all, and that sends a statement. But I think it really boils down to two things. One, the hubris of the clergy.
Ooh, okay.
And the other part boils down to the mass psychosis of the congregations.
Wow. Okay.
So when you get an arrogant, self-serving, self-centered clergy.
Oh, I thought he was going to
self-centered clergy. And you have a congregation that admires that arrogance and fuels it. This is what you end up with. The bishop in New York and some of the others that you showed in your presentation. So I think it's we attack, a lot of people attack the wealth. Oh, he's got a big car, he's got a big house. I think that's really not the issue. There are people who are doing okay and do well and have nice homes and have nice cars. But as Latasha was saying, how does a person get excessive wealth? I think there is such thing as excessive wealth. You have two people living in a house that has, 14 bedrooms. Really? I mean, so
it's because when poor people come through, you want to give them a place to transition.
Yeah, that sounds good.
But are we suspect? Are we suspect? For example, Bishop T.D. Jakes is closing in on $1 billion. Joel Osteen is, fabulously wealthy. I mean, they sell books. They have all sorts of productions. Are we suspect when we see a minister who is wealthy? One of the greatest, look, it's almost a proverb. When a minister gets wealthy, people begin to immediately assume that somehow or another he is or she is, kind of pillaging the congregation?
Oh,
Are we suspect of wealthy religious leaders?
I think sometimes, but with the names that you mentioned, Alstein and TD Jakes, I think we see, for the most part, we can see how they're getting their money. For instance, we see the books come out. We see the big conventions that they hold that people pay to attend. We see the movies they're producing. We see that their churches look like the church is being taken care of as well as the pastor is taken care of. And we see some of their philanthropic activities and things that they're donating to and the causes. Yes, although some were a little suspect with Olstein and that. So I think it depends. I think it depends on the leader. Some leaders, it's not as, it's not frowned on as much like those. But then this instance that we are seeing here, when you see a storefront church and you see the pastor's house, it's like these things don't add up. So that's when, to me, doubt kind of seeps in. But not always. I don't believe it's wrong to be wealthy. And I don't believe that it's wrong for a pastor to be wealthy. To me, it boils down to, and sometimes we're not even privy to what the pastor is doing with their money. I mean, we may see the ostentatious jewelry and the cars and stuff. To me, that's unnecessary. But they may be using their wealth to help other people, and we're not aware of it. Like I said, I think it still just comes down to are you bringing, as you're getting wealthy, are you bringing your congregations up as well? Are you helping them grow and become wealthy? Or are you just hoarding all the wealth for yourself? Then I don't have a problem with that. But if I see, because for instance, this pastor, I was reading an article, I don't know if you saw it, that he was under investigation for
fleecing one of his members.
I think $92,000.
One of his members.
Life savings of one of his members.
So stuff like that, when you hear that, then yes, doubt rises. Like, what were you doing trying to take this innocent lady's, retirement money? So it's like, you can't lump them all in one basket is what I'm saying. I think it varies from minister to minister.
Yeah. And if one's focus is to be rich and that is their primary goal as a minister, then I think that is a problem. When Paul continues to tell us to be content with what we have and not to be covetous. And so that proposes a problem. But, if God should give one wealth, I mean, that's not the sin. Again, it is what you do with it, how you use it. Are you taking advantage of these poor people? Because that's robbery,
Okay, let's not, we focused on the wealth part, but let's now focus on the charismatic part, the personality part, where
you could be charismatic and poor.
Yes,
you
can. I want to bear witness to the fact that you can.
Tally, before you make that move, though, I know that when I'm called to ministry, but I did not take a vow of poverty in being called to ministry. Maybe not even maybe. I know I took a vow to being humble. But not for me to say, okay, this is what's happening in my church, or this is, a lot of our churches are in the inner cities. A lot of our churches, there's a struggle, and I think we ought to be careful of how we come across, and it's difficult because now you think about it. We're looking at two things. We're looking at, and I know we're not there yet, the Adventist side of it, where everyone gets the same salary, no matter if you're in a big church or a small church, or it doesn't matter where you are. But there are also perks being at certain churches. That Christmas perks and birthday perks, and you could be at another church where there's none at all. Period. At all.
Large or small.
Large or small. You're right. Large or small. Sometimes we have. We have ministers that ask other people to, or they get up on the rostrum and say, "Hey, this is my 1-year anniversary or my 4th year anniversary." And you go to some churches, they're like, "And what do I got to do with us?" But I also believe that God has given all of us the mindset, and I'm talking about ministers, the mindset to be brilliant in all things. And if God blesses you to be wealthy, then you go with that, but not to flaunt it in people's face, not to On my Facebook page right now, I have a Tesla, a red Tesla that's on my cover page. I would love to have that car, but I also second guess myself having that car because I'm sure I have congregants and families that don't even make that in 5 years.
Why is it on your page, if I might ask?
Why?
Yeah.
It's a dream, a dream.
And I tell you, it is
just
a dream.
said
It is a
Biggie.
dream. But the thing is that people would not be able to understand that actually, or a car like that, not just that one, but a car like that is.
So it's something you aspire to.
I do. And not only that, but it also will help
Tesla.
with ministry. And without even joking about it, with gas, the way I travel in ministry, the way I get back and forth in ministry, is totally an investment or a savings. But
You
it's
can get a Prius, aren't they?
I didn't say anything about a Prius.
Yeah, I
didn't say anything about a Prius.
Which is preferred for a minister to be wealthy and to have wealth, or to be?
I'm gone.
At least he has holy shoes. I mean,
remember when Jesus, guys coming into the ministry. I mean, think about this: you're coming into the ministry, and this guy shows up, and Jesus says, "Here, well, let me put you with our HR department." And the first lines on the page is, "The foxes have dens and birds have nests, but in this thing, you might not have a place to lay your head." Now, I mean, that's the introduction to you. Does it appear that Jesus is saying that, and this is the same Jesus who said that, how hard it is for a person with wealth to enter into the kingdom. It's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle. For another person, he says, look, why don't you sell everything that you have,
That's right,
give it to the poor, and then come and follow me, and you'll have riches in heaven.
That's right.
And I discovered that riches in heaven doesn't translate well at the grocery store.
Right. Well, I think that I think these people, many of whom you highlighted in your opening, understand the science of religion. There is a science, and it leads us to the reality of industrial complex. Once we get involved in industrial complex, it's like a runaway train, and we keep justifying it. One example is the military. We're at $1 trillion budget for the military. In the United States, our military budget is larger than most of the Western countries combined. Yeah. All right. So what does that mean? Well, it's industrial complex, and it was almost anything. And I think with the church, there is industrial complex. And I think these religious scientists, is what I call them, understand the industrial complex of churches and people. And so what we're seeing is religious industrial complex, where we get the big houses and the cars. And it's not to say that some of them have not used their wealth or the church's wealth to help others, because many of them, I'm sure, have, with helping the poor and having community programs. I mean, let's not, sweep with a broad brush. Some of these pastors have, they have full-time staff, and they try to help out with community. So, and that's a good thing. But I think what we see is the flash and dash and spectacle, and then we sweep with a broad brush. But all they're doing is participating in the science of religion. It's industrial complex. Get what you can while you can.
Chuck, can I go back over to charismatic? The reason why I say that is because I think, we were talking earlier about Bible characters who are charismatic, and pastors who are charismatic. That's able to lead people, whether we get into the poor side of it. And when I say poor, I don't want to say a wealthy side or not. Let me just say that, because you can still be doing well and not wealthy. But I do think God instills with everyone a personality that draws people either way, in some way or another. You have different personalities. You have quiet personalities that still draw people.
Absolutely.
And you have over charismatic people like Tally, who still draw people to them. And
yeah.
And
I mean, look at Mr. Rogers. I mean, he had a lot of people.
You're right. Wow, Chuck, that's a really good
point.
That's a real good point.
And he was a minister.
And he was a minister.
He was a minister.
Right, that's right.
At pastoring West Philadelphia Church, and some people, I have an oversized personality. I think I think it matches the rest of me. But
I was waiting for you to follow up.
but
Mhm.
preceding
Oh,
me
Tally.
was a pastor at West who was almost the exact opposite, but who was still just Colin Brathwaite.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
I mean, what is
Yes.
as beloved and people just drawn to him. He's just as quiet and as laid back,
Mhm.
Yep.
and
Mhm.
so everybody has their own. But I think that the thing is that all churches want personalities.
Mhm.
Let me ask the question: is it now? You got places like the Quakers
Mhm.
and Jehovah's Witnesses, for example, where that's not an issue. You're not getting, you don't get to call some colorful person to your pulpit. And then you get churches, like, look, let's face it, in our denomination, we are drawn to the personalities.
Yeah.
Cleveland was a true,
I was
Right.
going to say that.
yeah. I
Mhm.
mean, when you talk about he was such an outsized personality that all of the ministers, when I joined the church, I used to wonder, well, why were people talking like that? What
Yep.
was it
Everybody
about
talk
the
like
thing
it.
that they were saying about
Yep.
it?
Mhm.
And it was
Boy, you
because
two
they
are
were
really good
Yeah, that was excellent.
impersonation. Boy,
everybody. You couldn't go to Oakwood unless you could do that impersonation.
yeah, you could make more recordings in Cleveland.
And
But
then
funny as
people,
you might say, uh, he did not have a personality. One of his stories is that he had to ask God to have a sense of humor, because he was so stiff in the ministry that he said his personality was terrible. And and I believe that God gave it to him. You talked about earlier when Solomon asked for wisdom, God gave him more than just the wisdom. He gave him wealth. I believe that God divvies out our personalities and says, "Hey, you're able to handle this, or you're able to look at C.D. Brooks. I mean, he gets up in the pulpit and he opens his mouth. Walter Pearson opens their mouth. NAD president, what's his name? And from the past, Tally, Brooks, Bradford, Elder Bradford opens his mouth, and Bradford does not have the stature.
Hmm.
He doesn't have the stature, but he has the personality. Listen to me. He has humor. Humor is within his within his sermons.
Well, I think that's what parishioners are looking for. They're
Sure.
looking for their unique style of presenting the gospel.
Sure.
And all the names that you mentioned are individuals who had a very unique style, and people love that style of presentation. I happen to believe, not because I've worked closely with him, but I happen to believe that Walt Pearson was, at the time, when he was at his pinnacle, was the best preacher in the Adventist church at that time, because of his personality behind the pulpit.
Sure.
And, you might even find that personality behind the pulpit or during the delivery of a message is different from the person
Mhm. Mhm.
outside of the desk.
Mhm.
So yeah, and I think in that sense, in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, we are attracted to a preacher's style of presentation or presenting the word. And all of those names you mentioned had a very unique, distinctive style.
Right.
Well, I think it's the same in all of the churches that were when we saw the leaders in the beginning of the program. Their parishioners, their church members are attracted
Mhm.
to their personality and their style of
Right.
ministry. So the sin is not in your personality, your charisma, your character that you have is not in well, not necessarily character, you have bad characteristics, but and it's not in the money, it's in how you use it. Because
Mhm.
if you have great
Right.
influence and you're able to lead a great flock of people to Christ, that's beautiful. But if
Mhm.
you along the way become puffed up, arrogant, whatever happens to one when you lose sight of God, then it becomes an issue there. And so God gives to whomever he wants, whatever gifts, right?
Mhm.
It comes from him. But our stewardship of what we have is what God is looking for. Are you going to use it for my glory, or are you going to
Mhm.
use
Right.
it for your glory?
Right.
My
Excellent point.
brother,
Excellent
not
point.
to, my brother comes here in I think in 2000, I think it's 8 or 9, and builds up RPC Church. Next year they decided they want to build, and I don't know the timing. I'm just calling it out. Next year or so they decide they're going to build a church. By the time you turn around, they have all this money to build a church. I'm not saying they gave the money to him because he's still living up the block from me, and our neighborhood is not that great. I'm just saying that the vision, God gives us the personality to push his vision. And I think that once we turn around and get caught up, and I really mean caught up into certain things, like being caught up into what we're wearing. Because remember, we're talking about jewelry. Because we don't do jewelry, I can still turn around with a $1,200 or $1,500 suit. And many, you know what I mean by that. You may not pull up in your car in a Toyota, but in your garage, you have a $90,000 car that you hardly drive.
Yeah, red Tesla.
Well, it was more orange than red, but no. But I think that's the problem. I think one time this guy, this felon, and you said Canarsie, Brooklyn. You caught me because I grew up in Canarsie. Canarsie is not that big, right? One of our pastors went to school with him. Pastor Tyler went to school with him. I'm sure he had great intentions at one point or another, and something turned. Something he recognized that with the gifts that he has, he could take advantage of people. That's where we got to be careful.
That's the danger.
Right.
Yeah.
That's where the danger comes in, because many
it
of
still goes back to that hubris. You got arrogant personalities, and there's nothing wrong with wealth, but there's wealth in excess.
Spell
that's
that
with
word
anything.
Spell that word, Hubert. What? I'm just gonna look it up.
Hubris.
Tally, I wasn't talking to you.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Well, correct. He was correct in the spelling. No, what I'm saying is that we look at the things. We judge. Okay. Oh, he's got this kind of car in the house and all. Okay. All right. Fine. I want to deep dive into the individual. If a person is blessed by God with wealth, how do you handle that? How does the leader handle that? Is that wealth for that leader and his immediate concerns, or is it to help the communities? Is it to help those that are less fortunate? Because it sends a message that when these preachers of these mega churches,
right,
their personal wealth puts them in the upper 1% of wealth.
Yes.
That's a message to the folk lower on the totem pole. I mean, I just think that this is why a lot of young people now are dropping out of organized religion, because they're seeing this excessiveness in the name of Jesus, and they feel like, is that what God is all about?
Well, why couldn't I have a jet? And I know I'm being sarcastic about this, but why can't I have a jet and fly from New York to California and still have 2 churches as a bishop? You understand what I'm saying? Because I'll still make it over there in time in order to have worship.
That's the Kenneth Copeland response.
But it's true, right? And they're actually and then they're making a plea. I'm here trying to get sponsors for my kids at Camp Danny Davis. They're making a plea for a jet because demons ride in commercial planes.
Right.
I mean,
if you've taken some flights lately, you might be inclined to agree,
but this is what I want to also say along with what Chuck was saying, because I don't know if everyone starts out crooked. I want to think that people have a general feeling and a call to the ministry, but something happens along the way. So it's not, Satan is like instrumental in making, he uses the carrot, at the rabbit, and, because he wants to see, what really has become your desire now. What is your desire? Is it more to spread the gospel, or is it to have your own wealth and fame? Because again, there's nothing wrong with being wealthy and being a preacher, whatever, but it's what you do with it. And Satan knows that if he can exploit you and cause you to go off path, that it will turn people off from Christianity, because now we've misrepresented Jesus Christ, and no one wants to have a part of it. And then the opposite side of it is that we must be careful not to go so far to the left that then we are not a blessing to the church. I remember a few years ago, and I am in a small church, and the church has a dire need. And I'm trying to portray to the people, because they're not giving, but they're driving nice. You know, they're living nice.
You know,
they're not giving. But let me finish this, Chuck. One of the spouses comes and visits, says, you know, she kind of asks for too much money. You know, asking a member to give $100, you know, budget just to make sure we are able to fix the roof. You know what I'm saying? And so people say, oh, no, asking for money. And so if you don't give, your church goes down. So we have to have balance. You know, I just want to throw that out.
Yeah, I just wanted to say in closing, because I know we have to land this plane like pretty quick. For me, it boils down to these individuals become gods to people.
Oh my goodness!
And the scripture clearly says, "You shall not have no other gods before me." These people become gods, and they're worshipped, and they give every dime they have. And so, you know, we have to be careful, even within the Adventist church, with celebrity pastors. They can become gods to us.
Yeah, I was going to say that too. What does it say about us, the members, those who in the pulpit who are listening to these charismatic preachers and, you know, withdrawing our life savings and, you know, doing our best to bring that $1,000 request back to church? What is it about us that makes us feel like that's what we need to do? You know,
well, because we're trying to buy salvation.
Well, you know, and there's that, but everybody wants to invest in something that is winning. I mean, all of you have walked past people with cups sitting on the corners saying, you know, alms to the poor. You walk right by them and you wouldn't put a nickel in the cup. Yeah. However, if somebody came and said, hey, look, this is something really big, we're willing to invest in it. Everybody wants to invest in something that looks like it's successful. And
that's why, you know, that's why the Philadelphia Eagles sold more T-shirts when they won the Super Bowl than when they were.
Exactly. I mean, people will, and people will pay more for a winner's T-shirt, you know.
Right. But if the pastor is the only one winning, is what I'm saying. Like if you don't see the church isn't getting better, you're still in the storefront, but the pastor comes with some new jewelry the next week. And I mean, at what point?
Well,
we take the blinders off.
If you, Reverend Ike was an icon of this.
Don't do that. Don't talk about
Reverend Ike was, and that is, even though I don't have anything, even though I just lost my job, that's my pastor, and I am succeeding by proxy through him.
I sent him at 12 years old. I sent him $10.
You sent Reverend Ike $10?
I sure did. I was listening to the radio one day. He told me to touch the radio. Told everybody to touch the radio.
That is a clear example. One clear example of the science of religion. It's a science.
I said,
those who master the science get wealthy.
But look at how you have ascended, Pat. Look at how you've grown.
Well, I'm glad he said ascended and said descended.
Yeah, you do drive nice, buddy. I saw what you drive. You drive nice.
No, that's hers. I don't have one right now.
And everybody know that is the smartest thing of wealthy ministers. Put it all in the name of your wife.
That's hers. No, but let me ask you a question. I sent Reverend Ike $10 at 12 years old, and he sent me back a piece of yarn.
A
piece of yarn.
A yarn?
I got that from Walmart.
In bulk. It was a piece of yarn.
And my
said, "I'm going into ministry."
And look at how successful he's become.
Right.
Look at how.
I mean, Daddy
that takes us right into
in Washington D.C. where they had to literally wash his money before he could touch it. You know, and believe it or not, you literally have people who are in your congregations, even in the Seventh-day Adventist congregations, where a pastor can kneel down in his chair and put a hole in the bottom of his shoe purposely, and so people
Yeah.
could see it, so that
Yeah.
they will
No,
give him funds or give him fun.
no.
It happens. You know, you could
Well,
dry beg from the
They
pulpit.
put a hole. He put a
yeah.
hole in his shoe.
Well, now, yeah.
No, that's what Hallie, you told me how to do that. I thought you
Well,
No,
now keep
no.
in
If
mind that
anybody
it's
knows about holy shoes,
well.
please
Now
go
let's
ahead,
keep in
Charles.
mind that it's not just Christian, the Christian
That's
faith.
true.
I mean,
That's
Sure.
the
true.
Nation of Islam,
sure,
Louis Farrakhan. I
sure,
mean, you know, he's not riding around in a Volkswagen.
sure.
You know?
All
Yeah.
I
right.
think
So
it's the
nothing against
in.
Volkswagens, but you know, in the context of what we're
I want
saying,
to ask a question real quick. Then that is, God gave Solomon wealth. I mean, ostentatious, overwhelming wealth, to the extent that the Bible speaks of him being the wealthiest person in the world at the time. Now, how did it work out for him? You know, because God gave him the wealth. How
Sure.
did it work out for him? How did it work out for the people? Now, for those of you who may
I know
not
he was
know,
really taxing the people heavily.
that's exactly,
Mhm.
he taxed them so heavily, but because he was Solomon, they kind of left him alone. But it directly led to the dividing of
Of
Israel,
Israel. It's true.
because
No,
after he died, they said to his son, they said, "Listen, man, can you just ease up?" And you know, the son got bad counsel and said, "I'm going to make my daddy look like a wimp."
Mm.
And before you knew it, the land had separated. Remember, Solomon chased away Jeroboam,
That's right.
and then the king of Egypt took him in and then sent him back, and that's what led to the splitting of it. So, but God gave Solomon the wealth. So, are we saying that God is responsible for what
you know,
happened there?
I don't know. I'm a little challenged because in the context of that day when God gave wealth, sometimes we give wealth to these charismatic personalities,
Or we get
and we
But
say
God,
God gave wealth.
he
He
did,
gave it,
because he
but
gave it through us.
it was mismanaged, though. I mean, he didn't handle it
So
properly.
Mm.
I
yeah.
still think it's the
All
So, and
good and
that's
mindset.
the case
perfect
now.
gifts come from the
I still
Lord.
think it's the mindset, guys, because I believe that it can turn you. Like sometimes your attitude changes when you have something,
Yeah,
or
your
when
priorities change
and
too.
you lose
I know your
focus.
attitude really changed when you ain't got nothing. I can tell you that.
It
Right.
goes both ways. All right, you become
Yeah.
more humble when you don't, and you feel like you have options when you do.
Is
And when you see your bank account looking pretty good, you always want to see it doubled than the way you saw it before, and then you lose focus on how it happened legitimately before, and you don't care how it happens now as long as it's there. I still think that this man, I don't know his life or his lifestyle from before, but I've seen preachers. I've even seen myself, and I don't rob people or want to take from them, but you always want to have, even for the excuse of giving back to the community, you always want to have. That's where the danger comes in. The danger comes in when you know that God gave it to you. Thank you, God, for giving it to me. Now let me do it on my own, or let me try to figure how I want this to
Right.
be done
Right.
on my
Right.
own. And
And
that's
that's how it
when
gets to be excessive.
that's
is,
it.
is
And
our church opposed to ministers being wealthy?
No. And can I tell you what I
Oh,
think
really?
wealthy is? We had Brother Joseph
That's
on some time ago, I believe.
Mhm.
And
Lamont
I
King.
believe wealthy right now is assets between $3 and $5 million. That's where we are right now. If I want to talk about what wealth is, 5 million.
Hey, wait a minute. I have to have $5 million in order for you to consider me wealthy?
Well, I went by him, and I think he's an expert in where he is. But if I had
I've been in the
if
hood
I
too
had five
long.
million dollars right now,
You wouldn't be here. We get it.
no, but you see that mentality. The mentality is immediately I say to myself, if I had this, I wouldn't be doing this. But doing
right.
this is where God wants me to be.
Well, the reason I
yeah,
ask is because we work in a church where, and all of my friends who are not Adventist ministers say, well, let me make sure I get this straight. If you've got 75 members,
Right.
you make a certain salary.
Sure.
If you have 3,000 members, you make the same salary.
That's right.
Doesn't that appear to put some impediment on the ability of a minister to become wealthier in his practice of ministry?
but did
I
we come
see.
into the ministry to be wealthy? I
Didn't
mean,
ask
it's
that. I just asked
it.
if you
I know, but if we focus on,
didn't
how
say
many
that.
souls are saved,
Ain't talking
right?
about that. I'm
Yeah, I
just saying.
understand what you're saying, but you're looking at how many people who are under you versus,
No,
whether it's large or great. Should the preacher get paid the same?
no, I'm looking at a passage of scripture that says, "Don't muzzle the ox that treads out the corn, and that the workman is worthy of his hire." And if I have taken on more responsibilities, and if my work has resulted in a greater amount of return, do I not have a right to a certain level of participation in that? And this church says no. Does it not, Pat?
I don't know. A director of youth ministry, should I get $100,000 more?
Well, no, we got fewer young people now, so we take something from you.
But
We
I
have
do,
some thousands, many thousands.
I do think that it's probably to safeguard that the issue we talked about earlier, the danger of starting off with ministry in your heart and you just want to save people. But then when you're like, oh, but if I go to that church, I can double my salary, and then you're focusing on how you can get over there so you can get more money. Now, that might not be everyone's motivation, but you'd be surprised how it can um, become a pastor's motivation as opposed to the gospel. So now they're focusing on which church can help me maximize, which church can help me, pad my pocket the
Sure,
fastest. It
but
really
because
shouldn't do that.
Tasha, if you have a large church, you could push your own resources faster than if you had a smaller church. Look at Joel Osteen, for example. He takes not a dime from his church,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
But when you fill his dome and you have how many hundreds and thousands of people buying one book,
Right.
with 400% up costs on each one of them, I would rather I'd
That's what I'm
rather not
saying,
take the salary. I'd rather do. So imagine having a jam-packed 1987 DuPont Park triple park outside with 2,000 members. I'm not being evangelistic, but 2,000 members. Imagine being at a church like that and you come out with a book and those 2,000 people bought it and those 2,000 people told somebody else about it, et cetera, et cetera. You could right now you could make more than whatever your salary is just based on something that you put out. So I think that in Adventism, which I'm grateful for to hear what you said, Tasha, it keeps us all where we are, but it does something to us when it comes to power.
Right.
I think that some people would rather trade money than trade their power.
Well, I mean, one of the things in these other churches where you have big churches, you build the church yourself. You don't just inherit it. In the Adventist church, they assign you to it, and so people say, "I want that church," and they'll move somebody out and put you in it. And I remember one conference president, the minister was assigned to a church, and the conference president, the minister said, "I've always thought that I was suited for a big church." The conference president said, "Well, you can make that church as big as you want to."
That's
There you
right.
go.
That's right.
Sally, you know what I remember coming into Allegheny East Conference? President Cheatham asked me to take out a compass and put the point of the compass on DuPont Park Church. Then, turn the compass on a 10 mile radius, and says, you should be living this close to your church. I'll never forget it. And I said to myself, well, what if I don't want to live anywhere no, really, I remember I said, what if I don't want to live in the area? And really what I did, I had to kind of pick in the 9 mile radius. I mean, I was so happy to have the job. You understand what I'm saying? That I just do whatever. That I literally went on the outskirts of that 9 mile radius to find where it is that I wanted to live.
Are you intentionally defied the president?
No, I saw the inskirts, I should say. I'm sorry.
Okay.
The in of Tally behave. But I said to
myself, there was a conference president who was firing ministers who did not live within the area.
That's exactly right.
And
that's exactly right.
He was firing them.
And I think I made that statement to say this: what if the house I wanted was not in that area?
I just want to stress this again, because as ministers in the Adventist church, and I'm, in one way we say it's okay to be wealthy, another one, maybe not. But the Adventist church encourages a level of I don't want to say mediocrity. That's not a good word. But they want to make sure that well, you're going to be humble. That's for sure. Because, but because you can only make so much. Decapitate a person's earning potential, I think it's not fair. I think it's not fair. But not only that, but I recall this, that if you bought a house, that you could actually lose money. Remember that, guys? If you were renting and your house, you could rent an expensive house and they'd give you some extra money to pay for the rental.
So,
But if you bought a house, you lose money for
they changed
that
those
kind of
rules
thing.
now, but yes, it was
Yeah,
like
I mean, but there were subtle things that told you that they don't want you to have too much money. Then they're moving you. They used to move you constantly, so you couldn't really. I remember somebody telling me one time as a younger minister, "What you gonna buy a house for? We're gonna move you. You don't need to be stuck and saddled with the house." Now, at the same time, the
especially if
person
you
who
were an
told me-
intern.
yeah, well, I wasn't an intern, but the person who told me owned their house.
I was about to ask that.
That the
He's leaving.
now here's the other part. If you are not a pastor, you can find yourself getting a loan through the denomination that's interest free. But if you're a pastor, you got to schlep your way down to First National Bank, wait in line with your hat in your hand and the whole bit. Doesn't it suggest at a certain point that we want you to be very modest in your accoutrements?
I say both, and I also say it's a control factor also.
Okay.
I look at it in both ends. I believe that I believe it's a matter of control in one side of it, because I've seen the conference change as far as that goes, and I've seen people in our conference, I've seen pastors in our conference get, and some others don't get. So I see that, but I have to say that if we don't stay close to God. And and it has to be that way. I'm not trying to be like this, violin playing super spiritual dude. But I notice the further I'm away from God, the more I depend on me for, and I'm using it in this standpoint, for wealth. I depend on my own thought process on how I want to build wealth. Because right now, guys, upsetters, I am building wealth, but I'm building it for my children. It's really not even for me. I wanted them to have it a little bit more easier than I had it. And so I don't want to drive or get a helicopter or this, that, and the other. I don't want to do that because I want them to be able to do it without having a problem. And I noticed that when I stay on God's side to give me the wisdom, my wealth grows. I'm sorry. I'm getting closer to the wealth factor. When I did this, stop Tally. Stay on mute. When I decide to do it my way, I lose every single time.
Wow.
You know what I learned, Pat? When I take what God gives me and bless someone else, my wealth grows
I believe
immensely.
it. I believe it. I believe it.
Immensely.
I believe
Money just comes.
Really?
Opportunities come.
I
Yeah.
believe it. Marlena,
Sure does.
what we need to do is have a show. We're going to have our show on something of this nature because, the truth is that, no, I don't have this. Sometimes I want to put, to show what I have. Sometimes I want to do that. And that's not of God. It's not of God.
You want to flaunt it?
Sometimes I do want to flaunt a little bit of.
I know a minister who has a red Tesla on his Facebook page.
Well, I love flaunting my 24-year-old Honda Accord.
Hold on. If you want to know what's funny about that?
It attracts a lot of attention.
Yes. Right now, I have a 2004 Toyota Sequoia. Forget about what she drives. This is what I drive, right? I drive a 2004, and I flaunt that. I noticed that I flaunt it. So when people say, what do you have with this? I'm like, well, God is in it. And it takes me from here to there. And it takes me blah, 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 blah. And right now, some of you know this, right now is at a point where it's time for it to go. I'm at Pine Forge and it's supposed to go to the junkyard. I can't let it go. I just can't let that 2004. So it's going to stay on that property at Pine Forge and it's going to rot like the rest of those in the woods.
Not another one.
Well, I think what we have shown is that those who robbed that pastor in Canarsie, Brooklyn, are probably not aiming at any of the Adventist ministers at this present time because we don't have it. But there is charisma, there is personality, and our churches do try to get pastors who have charisma. And I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting to
There's
get a
nothing wrong with
pastor who
that.
has a certain
No
type
one
of
wants a dead
personality.
personality, not at all.
Right.
Yeah,
No one wants that.
So,
You know what I would like to do? I know time is gone, but I'd like for us to talk about some of our own celebrity pastors. And I think that I think it's good to talk about personality pastors and see just how God used them, and how we're drawn to what God has given them as gifts.
yeah.
Amen.
And celebrity could just be well known, not
Sure.
necessarily
Yeah.
wealthy. You know what
Jesus was a celebrity at
Yes,
one
sir.
point.
Right.
Yeah, and he didn't have a lot of money, you know.
Tally is a celebrity, and he's way below the poverty line.
Way
Deeply.
below. Oh my goodness.
Let me tell you, I have to look up to see poor people.
Well, you know what? Let me stop, because thank you for the
You better
$1,000
stop.
that you gave us.
Powers
I
in the
appreciate it.
words.
Well,
no.
there it is,
Does-
ladies and
does
gentlemen.
not the song we sing a lot? The more he gives, the more we give, the more he gives to you.
My
And
father
it's not,
said
it's not always money too.
my father said he's going to stop. He has stopped singing the song, Lord, I care not for riches or silver nor gold. He said he doesn't care. He doesn't sing that hymn
No,
anymore.
they don't sing that. Presbyterian and Episcopal churches don't sing those songs. I'd rather have Jesus than silver or gold. No,
What?
it's not either or. It's both and in those churches. So. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think that's all we can do for one program. But we want to, finding humility and balance is the thing, and relevance. I mean, if you've got a $100,000 car where everybody else has a bicycle, you might need to rethink your priorities. So there we have it.
I agree.
There it is.
But I want to say, you can ask for all that money in the Adventist church if you want. You're not going to get that.
We've been conditioned, huh?
You're not going to get that. But
Not today.
Yeah,
Well,
and I
I just want to say, a good friend of mine and yours, all of us, Elder Brathwaite, there's one thing, if you've ever greeted him or he greeted you, he always said in passing, "How you living?"
Yep.
And that is very profound when you think about it. You'll say, "Hey, Pastor, how are you?" He said, "Hey, how you living?" Think about it. How are we living?
Yeah, that's
As Biggie once said, stupendous, giving ends to my friends and doing big business.
But no. And I just want to conclude my thoughts with saying that, being called to ministry comes with a lot of responsibility. And, I think we should focus on, bringing others to Christ and growing the kingdom and not our wallets, and not pimping out the gospel for our own gain, but staying true to using our gifts to make sure that people know of Christ and will make it to heaven with us. So
we're gonna assign Tasha to a church after all of this is done.
Yes, I'm telling you, she's
I want to hear her talk this stuff when she's down in Pickle Switch, Virginia.
Don't talk about Virginia. Don't talk about Virginia.
Oh, sorry about that, Marlene.
Yeah, that's where I'm from. But no, guys, great conversation. And if you want to weigh in on this subject, we like to hear from you. Send us an email, upset@acsda.com. We'll check out your comment.
Yes. Tell us about your pastor. Yes.
Yeah.
Let us know what he's driving.
No,
Oh
don't tell us about your past. No, I was like, but yes, thank you for tuning in for another episode of the UpSet podcast. We'll be back again next Sunday, same time, same place.
Yes.
And we hope to see you there. Have a great evening, everyone.
Have a good
Blessed
night,
week,
everybody.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Take care.